let's talk about psychology. But I want you to forget everything you think you know from like some dusty old textbook. Think of this more as a user manual for the most complex, most fascinating machine you will ever own, your own mind.
I mean, have you ever just felt completely stressed out and overwhelmed? You know that feeling, right? Where everything is just piling up and you're just trying to keep your head above water?
Or what about this? You have to make a big decision and you just freeze. You get stuck weighing all the pros and cons until your brain feels like scrambled eggs. And maybe the biggest question of them all, have you ever just stopped and wondered, why do people act the way they do? Or even, why do I act the way I do? What is really going on in there?
Well, if you have ever asked any of those questions, congratulations, you've already started thinking like a psychologist, because it turns out there is a science dedicated to answering exactly these kinds of questions.
So what is psychology really? Let's strip away all the jargon and get right to a simple, powerful definition you can actually use.
At its very core, this is it. Psychology is the scientific study of behavior and mental processes. The word itself comes from two Greek words, psyche, which means mind or soul, and logos, which means study. So, pretty straightforward, right? It's the study of what we do and why we do it.
Let's just quickly break that down. First, scientific. That part's super important. It means psychology relies on evidence and data, not just guesswork. Then there's behavior. That's everything we do that can be observed. Talking, walking, laughing, you name it. And finally, mental processes. That's our inner world, all the thoughts, feelings, and memories that nobody else can see.
Now, this field didn't just appear out of thin air. It was built by some absolute trailblazers who dared to study the human mind scientifically for the very first time. Let's meet a few of them. First up, you have to know this name, Wilhelm Wundt. In 1879, he did something that was absolutely revolutionary. He opened the very first psychology lab. This was a huge deal. It was the exact moment psychology officially split off from philosophy and became its own separate science. Then, you've got William James, often called the father of American psychology. He had a slightly different take. He wasn't just interested in what was inside the mind. He wanted to know what the mind was for. He kept asking, how do our thoughts and our feelings help us survive and adapt to the world around us? And of course, you can't talk about early psychology without mentioning the one and only Sigmund Freud. His big, game-changing idea was all about the power of the unconscious mind. He argued that so much of our behavior is driven by thoughts, memories, and desires that are totally hidden from our awareness. So after these pioneers laid the groundwork, the field just exploded into all these different schools of thought. Each one had its own unique lens for looking at the human mind. You can think of it like a big battle of ideas, all competing to explain, well, you.
One of the first teams on the field was structuralism. Their goal was incredibly ambitious. They wanted to create something like a periodic table of the mind. They thought that if they could break down any experience into its most basic sensory parts, is it red, is it sweet, is it loud, they could map out the entire structure of human consciousness.
And this shows their method perfectly. If a patient says, I feel uncomfortable, a structuralist wouldn't just leave it at that. No way. They would zoom all the way in. They'd ask you to dissect that feeling. Okay, but how does it feel? Is it sharp? Is it dull? Where is it? They were after the raw data, the basic building blocks of your experience.
But not everyone was on board with this. The functionalists, led by William James, argued that breaking everything down into tiny bits made you miss the whole point. They started asking a much bigger question. Why do we have these feelings in the first place? What is their function?
So for a functionalist, seeing a snake, feeling fear, isn't about describing the sensation of your heart pounding. It's about understanding that fear is an incredibly useful tool for survival. It floods your body with adrenaline, sharpens your focus, and gets you ready to escape danger. It has a purpose.
Then a totally different group stormed onto the scene, the behaviorists. And they declared a radical new rule. If you can't see it and you can't measure it, it doesn't count. They said psychology should just forget about all these fuzzy internal things like thoughts and feelings and focus only on what they could see, observable behavior.
And this is behaviorism in a nutshell. It's really simple. The patient does something, the breathing exercises, they get a reward, praise from the nurse, and that praise, that positive reinforcement, makes it much more likely they'll do that behavior again. It's all about learned associations.
But at the same time, another group, the Gestalt psychologists, argued that we don't experience the world in little pieces at all. They said our minds are built to see patterns and complete pictures. I'm sure you've heard their famous motto, "The whole is greater than the sum of its parts." This is a perfect example. When you see a patient who's hunched over, avoiding eye contact, and crying, your brain doesn't make a little checklist, right? You don't go, hunch shoulders, check, crying, check. No. Your mind instantly integrates all that information into one single, meaningful perception. This person is distressed. You see the whole picture, not just the parts.
Finally, we have humanistic psychology, which emerged as a kind of third force. It was a reaction against the pretty deterministic views of Freud and the behaviorists. Humanists said, wait a minute, people aren't just puppets of their past or their environment. They championed free will, personal growth, and the human potential for good. So, from a humanistic perspective, it's not about analyzing a patient's past or reinforcing their behavior. It's about connecting with them on a deeply human level. It's about offering empathy, total acceptance, and helping them find their own strength and meaning, even when things are tough.
Okay, so these early schools of thought, this big battle of ideas, they all paved the way for the psychology that we know today. And trust me, it has branched out into pretty much every area of our lives.
And today, those foundational ideas are everywhere. You've got clinical psychology helping people with mental health. You've got health psychology looking at the link between our minds and our bodies. Social psychology, which studies how we act in groups. There's even sports psychology helping athletes achieve peak performance. The principles are all around us, shaping our world.
So the next time you're trying to understand yourself or figure out why someone else is doing what they're doing, just remember these different lenses. Are you going to break down the experience like a structuralist, look for its purpose like a functionalist, or see the whole person striving to be their best like a humanist? The choice now is yours.